people who are at home at this moment are realigning. They're doing a lot of introspection and asking themselves about their careers and where they want to move forward once everyone's back to work. Obviously, the unemployment numbers that came out in the last couple of days are certainly alarming to anybody, but I think that there's also this great resilience and optimism that, you know, we are going to be back to work. We are going to be back, you know, to a sense of normalcy relatively soon. But while we are at home, it's a really good opportunity to talk to some experts, to network, to redo your resume, to start thinking about, you know, what does your career look like in the future? So let me tell you a little bit about Linda Sollars. Linda is one of Denver's most well-known job-seeking consultants. She provides inspiring, authentic, heartfelt, common sense approaches to job seeking, development, and career training. She's transformed the focus of individuals throughout the entire city. It's just a great honor to have her with us. She is the president of Creating Purpose LLC. It's a coaching and consulting firm in Golden. And she works with individuals, she works with businesses, helping them to define their personal brand and addressing multi-generational workforces, all kinds of stuff. It is just my pleasure to have her here. How are you doing, Linda?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Andrew.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that I find so interesting is, you know, when we first met, this was probably, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, the thing that impressed me the most is that you are a product of career reinvention yourself. I am too, and I think a lot of people are, but, you know, right now, we are in this very, very surreal moment in time, and all of these, the unemployment numbers are just off the charts, and it's daunting, and it's incredibly overwhelming. Can you talk a little bit about your own career reinvention and what it took for you to be one person in one career and become a different person in a different career? And you're actually the same person, but you have a different career.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it is a very challenging situation that we all are in now. And certainly I was in the end of 2005. After working about 30 years in marketing and advertising, I was laid off. And the company I was with had been purchased, and many of us ended up being laid off. And I had to decide what I wanted to do next. At that time, I was 57 years old and had no plans of getting another career. I was actually planning on retirement at that time. I couldn't go back into marketing and advertising, partly because social media had begun to take over, and I had some knowledge of it, but not nearly what other people had. And also my age in terms of what I was making and that sort of thing. So I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do next. I decided to go back to school and finish up a master's degree. Initially, I went back in to become a counselor. I thought I would be a great therapist because the layoffs and all had been so stressful. But after about a year in that program, it was mutually decided that I talk way too much to be an effective therapist, which is really true. So I finished my degree in adult development, and then I graduated, and we're now in the recession, the downturn in the economy in 2008. And there were very few jobs. I'm sure many of you remember that time. So I had to decide what I wanted to do next and how I was going to find that next job. I tell Andrew, and I think he repeats it a lot, in the fact that I made a decision to update my resume and go to the local grocery store, which was very close to the workforce center that I live near. And I went to the grocery store with my resume, stood in line, and asked people if they knew anyone working at the county workforce centers. And if they did, would they please have them contact me so that I could decide whether or not it made sense for me to go to work for the county. I'd never worked for government before. Most people looked at me as if I was crazy, but some people took my resume and contacted me and gave me some information about a position that was actually in human services. And that person actually gave me the name of someone in Workforce Center that had a job they were getting ready to post for. They needed someone who had been working in corporate to be able to help them put together resumes for a lot of the corporate people that were coming into the Workforce Center. And I was hired. I ended up being the training director there for a couple of years and moved completely into career development.
Okay, now before you go on, wait, because there's a buildup to this story that you're leaving out, right? So first off, before I get to that, when you were laid off, how did it feel? What were the emotions? And
I can tell
this
you,
unbearable thing and overwhelming. I mean, all of the things that you went through, and then how did you end up becoming focused on your next step?
So the day I was laid off, I can remember standing in the parking lot with my box of things from my desk and looking up at the freeway and thinking somehow I got off the freeway and I have no idea how to get back on. I felt very isolated. I felt very alone. I felt very helpless in trying to decide what had happened and where do I go next. So
you'd been in a senior level marketing position for several years. Mm-hmm. And this idea of reinvention, or this idea of realigning your career, you know, I know you went back to school, but then you had the challenge of saying, okay, I've got all these great new skills from my new college degree, but I've never done what these skills provide me with. So how did you deal with that?
No, in my college degree, I ended up getting a degree in adult development and education, but I hadn't done anything in education. And trying to determine what type of position I should be looking at next was certainly a challenge. One of the things that I did right away was beginning to look at my strengths. What did I come to the table with? What did I have that could be transferable into another position as well? So I took Strength Finders. I took another assessment, a free assessment called VIA, V as in Victor, IA, and looked at my strengths, began to develop a personal statement for myself. Just how do I talk about myself? How do I decide who I am before I decide what I want to do? I feel very strongly that that was very helpful to me.
And so as you became more clear and more focused about what it is you wanted to do, I'm assuming you went about it in doing a traditional job search, sending out resumes, going on job boards, calling people, doing what you could. And then you had this harebrained idea to go stand out in front of a grocery store and see if that would work. That takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of, chutzpah. I mean, just to stand out in front of a grocery store and start handing out your resume. I talk to job seekers all the time, and there's levels. There's a comfort zone that people are it's very you. I mean, what is it about you that said, why not give that a shot? Do something different.
You're absolutely right. I did leave that out. I sent over 200 resumes out, and I got 0 response. Not one person contacted me. Not one person did I connect with at all. I had been sending resumes out based on jobs that I found in the paper, or jobs that I found on paper, online, any of those places that I found looking at websites. But I hadn't tried to connect with anyone anywhere. I was just sending them in randomly. And Andrew, as well as I know, just sending resumes out, it goes into a black hole. And there is no connection most of the time. So one of the things after sending out all of these resumes and feeling like, what's going on? As you said, I was in a senior level position. I certainly had experience and transferable experience, if not staying in marketing, but I wasn't getting any response from that. So I looked at updating my resume a bit to not just focus on marketing, but to focus on what my transferable skills were in leadership, having to do with time management, in communications, that sort of thing. And then said, if I'm not getting any responses on this, I need to go hand my resume out somewhere and see if I get a response. And because the county and the workforce center were very close to me, and someone had mentioned that if you were looking for a job during the recession, a government place was a good place, that they were still hiring. So I went to the grocery store closest to the county and started handing out my resume in line. And yes, I suppose it did take some chutzpah at some point in time, but at that point in time, I wasn't sure how else to be able to get A, the information of whether I would be a fit into government, and B, where I could find a job. The government, you know, has many layers.
Yeah, so there's two lessons here right off the bat. There's many, but two that stick out to me. Number one, job boards only go so far. And that there is also a sense of false hope that job boards give you. And I know that sounds funny coming from a person who runs a successful job board, but it's been my experience working with job seekers that if there is a sense of, if you're in your pajamas and it's 10 o'clock in the morning and you're just randomly sending off resumes because it looks like it's a good fit, you're going to get frustrated very, very quickly. And that's a very difficult position to get into. I call it the job seeking quicksand. So the idea of doing something different, the idea of getting out of your comfort zone, and that could be cold calls, it could be showing up at a company sometime with your resume, it could be going and standing in front of a grocery store. It's an important thing to do, to try and take yourself out of what you might be doing and thinking of doing something completely different. We'll talk about networking in a little bit. You know, the other lesson is being able to talk about yourself. Being able to actually have your, call it an elevator speech, your stump speech, and having that connected to your brand promise and the touch point relating to your resume. And then being able to actually talk to somebody with a confidence, not with embarrassment or any kind of shame, but letting people know what it is that you have to offer as it relates to the value connected to your skills, your education, your background. And then thirdly, and I think this is the thing that a lot of people who have not been in sales or marketing don't realize, whenever you have an opportunity to talk to somebody, you have to have an ask that goes with it. And in your case, the ask was, do you know anybody in Jefferson County government? Do you know anybody of any jobs in Jefferson County government? Are there any connections at all? And I think it was very disarming. I mean, as you tell it better than I do, more people than not gave you that 3 minutes of their time for you to talk to them.
Yes, the people that took my resume, I got contacted by several people who someone's husband or someone's brother, sister, someone worked at the county that sent me an email or called me, because I had both on my resume, asking me what could they do to help? How can I help you? And one of the things I needed to have when they had that ask of me, I needed to be able to say what I was looking for next. And that was a critical piece of saying who I am, first of all, talking about my strengths, and putting together what I call a personal statement, but absolutely a strength statement, talking about here's the things I bring to the table, but also what am I looking for next? So one of the things that I work with all of my clients on is developing something called a job framework, is my terminology for it. And I can explain briefly on how to put it together if you'd like.
Yeah, let's get into that. Let me just make one other comment. You know, these are times where, you know, hope is very, very difficult to have right now, when this uncertainty that is existing out there right now. I'm an optimist by nature, and somebody had I read something this morning. They said that, you know, God didn't write a period; He wrote a comma. And so this isn't, you know, this is a comma in all of our lives. And we're going to get back to a sense of normalcy. And some of that normalcy is going to be back to applying for jobs online. But I hope from this seminar that people take away that there's a lot of different ways to find a job. And there's a lot of different ways to think about yourself in terms of what it is that you want to do. So let me ask you this. The idea of doing something completely different than what you have done before, that really can seem like jumping off of a cliff for some people. Not knowing, where you're going to land. What are the things that folks need to think about before they take that step? I mean, in addition to understanding motivation, transferable skills, career directions, obviously the things that people have to deal with is finances. I still need to pay my rent. I still need to pay my kids' college tuition. I still need to pay the car payment. Education. Do I have the right skills? Should I think about doing some classes and some training? About the types of jobs, and as you had mentioned earlier, the age issue too. And I'm saying all this because those are some of the more overwhelming things that I hear from job seekers when I'm trying to say, let's take each little bit and make this what seems overwhelming manageable.
Now, I say to job seekers all the time, you don't want to try to eat the entire elephant. When you're thinking now, at this particular time, it is one of the few times you actually will find in your life that you have a little bit of time to reflect on what you might want to do next, what that may look like, and what kinds of things you may need to have, as you said, to do that. But I think one of the things that I talk to people about is taking it a little steps at a time. The first thing I talk to people about is strengths, as I said, understanding who you are, being able to talk about that in a business sense, being able to have some framework around that to understand what that is. Then I do something what I call a career design. I have people write down, do they want to work out of their home? Do they want to travel? How much money do they need to make? What are they looking for in terms of benefits? What about work-life balance? What about the type of work environment or the type of work that would be interesting to them? Then the third step I tell them to do is start looking at some organizations that interest you. Nonprofit, for-profit, find something that actually interests you and expand out the areas that you're thinking about. Take a risk, think outside the box, look at some other things out there. Then I have people put together an actual job framework, which looks like a job description that they might want to take, that they can then use to connect with other people as you go through networking. But it's a step-by-step process. And each one of those things, spending a little time thinking about that and why that would be interesting and what you might want to gain out of that is really helpful.
Can you talk a little bit about transferable skills? I look at resumes every day and I start to look at, okay, this person has done this, but their skills are aligned with this other career. How do you know what's transferable, and how do you know what career or what new job is transferable?
Yeah, I focus my work, my business, Creating Purpose, focuses on people who are wanting to transfer or wanting to move from one position to another. Maybe they want to move there, maybe they were laid off, or maybe the company that they were working with is no longer here or in business, whatever reasons that they have, or maybe they've done what they wanted to do and now they're trying to decide something else. As an example, I may have someone who's an attorney who doesn't want to be an attorney any longer, but they come and say, what kind of skills do I have to do anything else? And one of the things we begin to talk about is, as an attorney, you have very good communication skills. You have very good time management skills. You are very good at research and development. There are a number of areas that we can talk about that might be very interesting to you that focus on that. So if you're good at time management and you like research, you could go into market research, or you could look at some things in program management. So the first thing is to look at what you know how to do that can actually transfer somewhere. I'll use another example of someone who came to me who had been out of the job market for a while being 6 years. And this person had physically left the job market to take care of a very ill father. who passed away, and then his mother became very ill and she also passed away. But he now had 6 years where he hadn't been in the job market. And when he first came to talk to me, he said, I haven't done anything in the past 6 years. And I always say to people, unless you've been sitting in your bedroom with your pajamas on and the door closed, you've been doing something. As it turns out, he had been working with his church to help set up some coffee carts. And he helped set one up because he'd been a program manager before. So he knew how to do these kinds of things to set up some type of a program for them. Ended up in that 6 years, he had done it for 14 churches, set up a nonprofit for the 14 churches, showed them how to order all of these things directly, saved quite a bit of money and all of that kind of thing. But for him, he didn't see that as being a skill because he wasn't paid for it. So that's another thing that begins to be a problem when you're looking at that. I want to say one third thing. If you've been working in, let's say in this particular environment, you decide to go to work for Amazon, or you go to work for Starbucks, or you go to work for one of the organizations, Safeway, King Soopers, who is hiring right now. And you're looking at that and thinking, how would that even work on my resume? Or what kind of transferable skills do I have if the main thing I've been working at is Safeway or McDonald's? Just to let you know, people who have worked in fast food have more transferable skills than a physician does, because they have worked in every possible way with customer support, with money management, with time management, all of those types of things. So it's actually taking you out of looking at just your job that you've been doing, but looking at a bigger picture of how that might look in another job. Very quickly, there is a website called ONET, O-N-E-T, that the federal government actually has set up. It's an excellent website. And if you go in there and the very first thing you see is occupations, and you put your name of the occupation in there, and it comes up with a list, and you pick one of those that sounds like what you've done, then it will give you a list of a lot of the different skills and values and abilities and things that you could use on a resume, but also you see how they can be a bigger picture rather than just the job you had, if that makes sense.
No, completely. You know, I had a seminar last week with CJ Juleff over at the Jefferson County Workforce Center, and we've known each other for a while, but here's something that I never knew. When she graduated from high school, she decided she wanted to become a car mechanic. And after she became a car mechanic, she wanted to build homes. She wanted to build buildings.
Oh, wow.
And she had all of these skills from her background all the way back there before she even decided to go to college. But, you know, when we start making the connections, I mean, she's not building homes right now, but she's building careers. She's building resumes. You know, she's not tuning up cars, but she's tuning up job searches. And, you know, you think, well, that's a completely different thing, but not in terms of the mindset. Yeah. And to your point about restaurants, I mean, I worked in restaurants for, 15 years. And I can tell you, I mean, the fast pace, the ability to get along with people who speak maybe a different language than you, the kind of collaboration that has to happen on a regular basis. Not only, I was a cook most of the time, all of that stuff was incredibly kind of my grounding in terms of professional work experience that I experienced later on. And I would actually, when I was doing a lot of hiring in corporate America, when it came down to 2 or 3 candidates that could do the job, one of the questions I would always ask them is, did you ever work in a restaurant? Because that to me was a connection to me, and I understood that very, very much so. So, some people think, well, there are these menial hourly jobs. That's not the case at all. You are working hard. There's skills that transfer into so many other different jobs that you have to take those and really run with it. Now let me ask you this, because you also work with job seekers. They're not just saying, I want to do something different, I don't know what that is, but they're also folks who are saying, you know what, I've really wanted to do something that is my passion, and I have no idea how to go about it. I know when we did the Reinvent event a few years ago, you're gonna have to correct me, but there was an attorney who was really into bikes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And and that was his passion, was bikes, and he wanted to work in the biking world, in that industry. Can you tell us either that story or some others?
Sure. He actually he was working in doing some things with marketing, but in basic marketing. I mean, he had a very entry-level job in doing that. But when he came to talk to me, he said, "I thought marketing was where I wanted to go, but it really isn't my passion." And when we started talking about his passion, he rode bikes on the weekends. He was in a lot of races. He was very passionate about bicycle safety, about the usage of bicycles, and he just could talk forever about that.
He knew a lot about it too.
He did. He knew a lot about it. He'd been doing racing for about 7 years. And, but it was strictly something he did on the weekends or something he did, you know, during his vacations. He never thought of it as being something that he could do for an actual job. And I started talking to him about the fact of the things that he had been doing in marketing. And actually he had worked in a restaurant for a while as well. And what those would look like if he was transferring them into something having to do with bicycles. And he kept saying to me, "But there aren't any jobs in bicycles that I could do. I mean, what kind of job could I have?" So we started looking at, just like I had said, start looking at companies that interest you. And what he found was there were several, and people may not know this, but there are several organizations and companies who make world-class bicycles here in Colorado, even here in Golden.
Oh yeah.
Lived in Golden, and he found one in Golden. And so we set up something for him to just go over and talk to one of the people there. Just talk to him about his passion and what he wanted to do and what that might look like. And he set up an appointment with someone to connect, sat down and talked to him and told them he had been doing and beginning to do some things in marketing. And they said, "Oh, you know, we're actually looking for someone that could help us design shirts and things that we could wear that would advertise our bicycles when they were in competitions."
Oh yeah.
What we wanted him to do was to design some other things. He got so excited for it, started talking about it. They actually offered him a job at the time he was talking there. And they said, "How much do you want to make?" And fortunately, we'd had a discussion on what are you looking for in terms of salary and that sort of thing. And he put his salary out there. They hired him, and he is now one of the executives of the company.
That's amazing. I guess the one I was thinking about, maybe it was the attorney who decided to become the president of a nonprofit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they transferred. He was doing something completely different, but his passion was this nonprofit cause or a charity of some sort.
Right. There are several of them. There's one that was an attorney. It had been an attorney in Washington, very successful attorney in Washington, D.C., and had decided didn't want that kind of stress, basically, but also felt like they had done all the things that they wanted to do with that. And this person's passion, I think this is one you're talking about, was in the nonprofit world, actually working with children and working with healthcare and children, but was very focused on doing that and really wanted to be involved in that, but had no idea, again, person that had volunteered to do things and had done some things with it, but never thought of it as a career. So the person went and started talking to some people in the nonprofit community and having some discussions about here's what I have done, here's what I'd like to do. Now they had developed what I call a job framework. So they were able to show them actually what they were looking for, and was able to show that, and actually came across someone that was saying to them, "We're looking for a senior executive in our nonprofit, and here's what we're trying to expand into," which was children's health, exactly what they were looking for, and ended up becoming one of the executive CEO, actually, of a nonprofit right away. And then I have someone who was working in a nonprofit, had been doing this for about 12 years, and now wanted to go and do something entirely different, but was looking at things, wanted to do something in the for-profit world, having to do with actually either program management, project management, or business development. And when we started talking about it and talking about what they really wanted to do and what they really enjoyed about working in nonprofit, they liked the sales. They actually liked the collaboration that they could do with other people, the bringing in some money, being very successful and doing that sort of thing. So, but had no idea, because they'd only worked in nonprofit, that for-profit companies would love to have them doing that as well, not in a sales role, but in a business development role. And what this person has done is put together, he was actually I was working with him a couple of months ago, and then we actually have had the coronavirus. So what he has done is put together a proposal as a consultant to do these kinds of things online, which he feels very confident in doing because he'd been doing them before and collecting money nationally, not only locally. So he put together a proposal. He sent it out to 3 different companies. All 3 of them have now employed him as a consultant, which he had not thought of doing at all before. And now he's putting together these kind of things online to do business development.
So folks who are watching this, please send us questions. There's a way for us to chat and check in on those questions. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear if you have some specific areas about yourself or your situation. If we can help answer those questions, that would be great. What I'm hearing, Linda, and it's something that I preach a lot about too, is that number one, sometimes the job boards are the cart before the horse. There's a lot of good personal introspection, examination, trying to really understand what it is you want to do, identifying your skills. And again, for folks who don't know what Strengths Finder is, it's a wonderful book with an online component it's just a terrific way to have an unbiased look at where your skills and strengths lie based on your own past experiences, your personality. So I highly recommend people doing that. And then can you mention again, what was that online assessment that you had talked about?
Sure. The Strength Finders is a book you can buy anywhere, Target. It runs about $14, and it has a coupon in the back where you go and take an assessment, and it will give you your top 5 strengths for that. There is something else you can buy that's more expensive. The other one is called V as in Victor, IA me.org. It is something developed by the University of Pennsylvania. It's a values and strengths assessment that you can go in and take, and it will give you a list of 24 different strengths in the order based upon your responses that day. And it gives you some of those, and some of those might be, some of your values and strengths might be love, or might be honesty, or might be those kinds of things that people don't think that they can actually talk about in a business sense.
Right.
But if anyone is interested, I have put together a document that takes those strengths such as honesty and love and kindness and put them into business words so that you can translate those as you're talking about them in an interview in a business sense. So if anyone's interested, I'd be happy to send them that document, and then they can take the assessment for free and then develop that from there.
What's the business word for love?
In terms of love, it has to do with creating connections, and having to love is caring about the business, caring about the community, great teamwork involved in positively respecting empathy, growth, those kinds of words.
So I would assume a business word for honesty is ethics, integrity, loyalty. Trust.
Absolutely. Those are the things. So I have a document, as I said, that I've translated each, because these are personal strengths. Strength Finders is about external strengths that you use with other people. This is about internal strengths that you have, and combining both of them together gives you a great way to be able to talk about yourself very successfully. And when you're in an interview talking to someone about yourself, you also have a job in front of you that you're interviewing for. So before you go in, you will look at that job description and find some things that might talk about, we're looking for someone that has integrity. We're looking for someone that has creativity. We're looking for someone that has leadership. And these are some of the things that have been part of your strengths that you can talk about.
So I can see, pardon me?
I just have one thing that I want to explain to people about putting together a job framework. This is one of the first things that I have people do. And how this works is you will go in and find at least 10 to 12 jobs that interest you. And open your mind, look at all kinds of different things. Find companies that are interesting, and then find jobs that are posted on there. Find jobs that are posted on Andrew's list. Find jobs that are posted on LinkedIn. And go through those job descriptions and read every bullet point on there. And the bullet points that you have done before and you want to do again, cut and paste those onto another Word document. Ones that you haven't done but you would like to do, also cut and paste them onto a Word document. Once you finish about 10 of these job descriptions, you're going to have about 2.5 pages of cut and paste. And then you will go through and put those into categories. Okay, so this one is accounting. This one is customer service. This one is leadership. This one is strategy. This one is communications, etc. Then read through those bullet points, all of them, and pick out between 12 and 18 of those bullet points and put them onto a third document with only your name, email, and telephone number on there. And now you have your name, email, and telephone number and about 12 to 18 bullet points that are written in job speak. You've taken them right off a job description, and this describes generally what you're looking for next. So now when you set up an informational interview, you can go and someone will say to you, well, how can we help you? What can we do for you? And you hand them this document and say, this isn't everything, but this is generally what I'm looking for. And what I would like to know from you is, number one, what would you call this job in your organization? And number two, who would you suggest I talk to about it? And this gives you a very solid way of being able to describe what you're looking for next.
That's fantastic. Now, I could start to see the light bulbs and the aha moments coming because we're getting a lot of questions here.
Sure.
So here's one. When looking at transferable skills, how long can you utilize those on a resume? For example, as a high schooler, I worked in a restaurant, multiple position over multiple years. However, given the time frame, I no longer put that on my resume. That experience was 20 years ago.
Yeah, and if you're developing a chronological resume, which everyone has seen, they tell you 10 years is the longest. But when I'm working with people with transferable, when they are looking at moving from one position to another, I have them do what's called a chrono-functional resume. You can look that up. What it does is it says, here's what I know how to do, as opposed to here's where I've worked. So it would have your beginning things about your name, email, and telephone number. Don't ever put your address on a resume any longer. That is not something that you do. And it has that at the top, and then maybe 3 or 4 lines about yourself. And then you would have a list of maybe selected accomplishments. And it would have communications and strategy and administrative and those kinds of things. And you can put bullet points underneath there for jobs you did 20 years ago. The second page will list where you have worked. And you only have to list where you've worked for the last 10 years, but you can put bullet points underneath those categories for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I also think one of the things I talk to job seekers about is be prepared to tell your stories, because your skills and your transferable skills, and and the stories have beginnings, they have middles, and they have ends. And explaining how your skills came into play motivating a team, how your skills came into play in terms of winning that sales award. Yeah. How your skills came into play in terms of convincing the CFO to fund a project that you were involved in. How and also the quantifiable results of the projects and the accomplishments and the successes that you have. Because I mean, I think you'd even agree, and some of the research has shown that resume is a branding document. And if it is simply going into a applicant tracking system, there's a format for that to help the computer rank you higher. And also that branding document, the way the information is organized, we know now what the recruiters are looking for. And usually the recruiters, not always, but a lot of times the recruiters are not the subject matter experts. They are simply checking boxes to find out if that information is aligned with what the job posting has. And so the bottom line is, even the best written resume, the person who's reading it is only going to get about 70 to 75% of you, who you are. Your interviews, the conversations you have, how you describe yourselves, your cover letters, all of that is going to complement that. But 75% is okay. I mean, that's going to get you into an interview. But the way the resume is set up, just like you're saying, is an incredibly important part. And I think that the stories about yourself, I mean, like if you worked in restaurants, and I'm I'm an example. I want to hear that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what did you bring away from it? And what do you still use from that kind of thing? A couple of things quickly when you're talking about that, and there's no way for people to be able to tell what 10 words are in some applicant tracking system. There's no way to be able to tell that. Yeah. So it's really important in general, when all of you are looking for positions or deciding what you want to do next, is to understand what you have control over and what you don't have control over. And you have control over how you present yourself, how you're able to talk about yourself, your resume, your cover letter, those kinds of things. You do not have control over what that person was thinking that morning, or whether they like the name Linda, or any of those kinds of things that come up. Those aren't there. However, there is a little thing that you can do, and that is to go into a website called tagcrowd, TAGCROWD.com. And it is a website that simply has you make a word cloud. If you haven't made one before, all you're going to see on there is a little box, and you will cut and paste your resume into that box, and it will come up with a word cloud of what words are you emphasizing most on your resume. Then put the job description of what you're applying to in that box as well, and see what words come out for them. And you can help perhaps put a few more words in your resume that might match some of those in that area.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip. I'll tell you a tip I learned, and I don't know if it works, but people have claimed it does, is that when you are on one of these applicant tracking systems, which you know you are, and for those who don't know, applicant tracking systems are programmed by the company, the recruiter, and there's keywords, key phrases, and other things that they're looking for, dates, companies, whatever. And a computer will actually scan through that document and then rank you based on the connections to that. Now, these were created in large part, and I'm as frustrating as they are, I understand them, is because of job boards primarily. They were, when job boards became the thing, all of a sudden they're getting hundreds of resumes for one job. And there is absolutely no way recruiters could manage that kind of a thing. So I've asked recruiters time and time again, it must be frustrating when you actually know you're not getting the best, absolute best candidates coming through those applicant tracking systems. And their usual answer is, we're getting the good enough. But saying that, people who are frustrated that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into resumes and the cover letters, and then they never hear back. A lot of times it's because a human being has never seen your resume. Now, the tip I have is that people have told me that when you get one of those big, god-awful drop-down boxes that you're supposed to cut and paste your resume into, and you're always worried about the format being lost, and it's gotten better, but you still see those from time to time. But people had told me that at the end of the resume, they take the entire job posting, they copy it and put it in clear font, and then they tack it onto the end of their resume. So nobody knows it's there but the computer. And so the computer's not only reading your resume, it's reading the job posting with, presumably all the keywords and key phrases as well. And, I'm not saying do that, but I've talked to HR people who say, yeah, we know that happens. And yeah, it might be give you an advantage in terms of getting your resume ranked higher. But you know, the other thing I want to talk about just for a second is job boards are prospect boards. They're prospect boards. So when you're looking for a job on a job board, make sure that it's, you know, very few of your job or your resumes that you're going to send out are going to be random. I mean, they're going to be aligned to something you want to do, and also aligned in terms of connecting skills, background, experiences, accomplishments, and things of that sort. There's a lot of job boards out there, and you know, here's some of the ones that I recommend. Is the Colorado Nonprofit Organization has a wonderful job board for jobs in the nonprofit world in Colorado. A lot of people don't know this, but there's something like 17,000 registered nonprofits throughout the state, and nonprofits are across the board. I'm going to have a seminar next week with my wife, who is an expert in nonprofits, talking about working for nonprofits. But you know, nonprofits are not, people have this idea that nonprofits are somehow, you don't make any money working for a nonprofit. That's not necessarily true. There's big nonprofits, there's small nonprofits. And so that's a really good job board. Another one is called Built in Colorado, and they work primarily with startups and tech companies. Another one is called the Denver Egotist, and this is like an advertising, marketing, communications blog, but they have a tremendous amount of really good jobs on there. The state of Colorado has a monster of a job board for jobs around Colorado, and you can register for that and go into there. So there's, you know, Indeed is really good. LinkedIn is terrific as well. So there's all kinds of places, and of course Andrew Hudson's jobs list. I'd love for you guys to come there. You know, I'm just a real quick pitch. My criteria is that I try my hardest to make sure that the jobs that come onto my board, they're real. The recruiters are actively recruiting. Every once in a while, there's going to be a job that gets taken down without me knowing it, so it appears the job's no longer there. But it also is a message to job seekers, is to apply quickly when you see a job. So I don't know if there's other job boards that you want to talk about, but it's an important part of the job search, but I would say not more than 20-25% of your time.
Yeah, well, and I think that LinkedIn is another one that I would suggest that has some great jobs in there as well. That is one of the things that I talk about a lot is to people is don't dedicate your whole day to this job search. An hour to 2 hours at most in looking at jobs out there and cutting and pasting them and deciding which ones you might want to apply to. No more than an hour in putting together your resume, and then perhaps an hour in sending out some connections somewhere, asking people who you might know, the organizations that you actually identified. I do want to mention one thing, and that is that there are people, a lot of people out there who decide they want to go from one position completely to another position. And then they go in and they now have gotten an interview with this new company for a completely different type of position. And the company asks them right away, well, why did you leave? Why are you no longer an attorney? Why did you leave marketing? What are you trying to do here? You have all this experience in it. And gee, we would like to have somebody that would work on our legal team here or work on our marketing team here. And what I always tell people is one of the things that you can do is to advise them that you really enjoyed being an attorney, or I really enjoyed marketing and learned all kinds of things on there, but I feel like I've learned everything that I really want to learn in that area. And I think it's time that I want to move into some other interest. And I've done some evaluation. I've spent some time deciding what that is. And here is what I want to do next. And once you clarify to them that it's not that you're leaving because you're a horrible attorney, it's that you've done everything you can there, and now this is time to make the next step in your life. Yeah,
no, that's a great point, because one of the other things about job seeking is the anticipated questions that you would get. And you know, a lot of times you can look through a job posting itself and anticipate what questions are going to be asked, but when you're actually doing the reinvention, you know, people are going to ask that question. And it actually brings up, somebody had written in, what do you recommend for someone who needs income now but can't find a suitable position? I left my former job in November to pursue certification in a new field, but that has been put on hold as certification testing centers are closed. I'm now in a position where I need a job ASAP, but I would be taking a step down. How do I talk about that with a potential employer?
At this point in time, you are very fortunate by a very, very unfortunate set of circumstances. Everyone is going through this. You are not the only person out there. So when you're interviewing, it's not going to be one of those things on your resume that says, well, you have been an executive here and now you're wanting to work at Home Depot. Yes, at this point in time, I am in the process or had been in the process of looking at other certifications. However, at this point in time, I really need to put together a job. And I am looking at what you offer and what kinds of things I can possibly do here. There are still jobs out there. Andrew has them on his job board. LinkedIn has jobs here in Denver that are still out there to apply to. And even though it takes a step down, A, it's not going to hurt your resume at all because everyone's going through it. I guarantee you it won't hurt. And B, if you need a job immediately, you need to put together whatever you can to be able to obtain the kind of salary or the income that you need to have right now.
Yeah. I get that question a lot, not specific to this person's case, but I'm overqualified. I don't want to do what I did before. I want to get more on the front lines. I don't want to be in management. I'm going to be stepping back. People are going to ask me. And, you know, I'm starting to take my resume and make it not appear as if I was in these senior positions or even in age itself, people that are worried about ageism, which exists. I mean, let's admit it, ageism exists, but all of a sudden, to me, it's kind of like, you know, you have a light dimmer and all of a sudden you're dimming the light as opposed to, you know, brightening the room with everything you have to offer and all the things that you bring to the table. To the degree, I mean, I know some people who have gone so far down this path that when they start describing themselves to me, it's a person that I don't recognize from their resume, and it's a person when they wake up in the mirror, they use all of these adjectives to describe themselves: too old, overqualified, underqualified, all of these negative things, as opposed to, I went to college, I got a great job, I was promoted, my boss loved me, I was a motivator, I inspired people, that my clients loved me. And instead, it's this picture of I'm too old, I'm this, I'm that, and that's what I'm working with. Not all of the things that make me who I am. Can you address that a little bit? Because I know you deal with that sometimes as well.
Oh, I deal with that all the time. The first thing is I have people that say to me, I don't want to put down the year I graduated from college because they'll find out how old I am. Guess what? When you go into the interview, they're going to figure out how old you are. You know, right. I mean, it's not something, as far as I'm concerned, I'm 72. It's not something that I'm ashamed of, that I'm afraid of. I have a lot of expertise that I bring to the table that can be very beneficial in mentoring, in being able to explain not only what I did do, but what I know how to do now. What do I bring to the table now that is very beneficial? And ageism happens also to those people coming right out of college. You're going to have people saying, nobody will hire me because I don't have any experience. So how do I get the experience to do those kinds of things? This kind of thing happens on both sides of that. But it has to do with, how do you talk about yourself? How do you see yourself now? And if you see yourself as someone that is over the hill, not able to do anything any longer, I'm too old to go in and do these kinds of things, then you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for that kind of thing. You bring an enormous amount of experience to the table. What if you've been home with children or taking care of elderly or been home for 10 years? And now you want to go back into the workforce, or you need to go back.
Linda, I need you to hold that thought for a second, because Channel 4 is going to cut off their segment of the show here.
Okay.
So I want to thank CBS 4. They have just been a wonderful partner in this. And it says a lot about their commitment to the community as well. So Andrea, if you'd like to say a few words, thank you so much.
Okay, we are done. We thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. And we're going to continue on here. We've got more questions to be asked, maybe for another 15 minutes or so. So thank you, CBS, and Andrea, thank you so much.
Thank you, CBS.
Linda, one of the things I'm getting a lot of response for is the document that you referred to. People really want to see that document about the framework, I think it was.
Oh, the job framework?
Yeah. And so there's a question. I think that's what you said that you would pass on, if it was that document or if it was the one about the words.
I can pass on the words, how you translate actually your values and strengths into business speak.
Yeah.
I have that document. I'd be happy to do that. And Andrew, do you want to post that on your website? Up to you.
That's fine. Some people asked if you would post it on your LinkedIn.
Oh, sir, I'll post it on my LinkedIn. Absolutely.
And then I will also have it. I know that there's people that are not only listening here on Zoom, but also on Facebook. So I can make sure that gets circulated.
I'll send it to you as soon as we're done here. Yes.
Let me see. There's a couple of other questions. Maybe that was it. There might be some on Facebook, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to get to them. I will tell everyone out there, if you think of a question later and you want to email me, I'm at ahudson@ahjobslist.com, ahudson@ahjobslist.com. And I'm happy to take those questions to Linda. I'm happy to try and answer them from my own level of expertise as well. What else would you like to say, Linda?
Well, I think the things that I would really like to emphasize for people today, this is a very uncertain time, something we haven't had before. We don't have the answers of how that's going to look totally on the other end.
Right.
But my feeling is that this is the one time in your life that you're being forced in some ways to be home, to spend some downtime, in thinking about what you want to do next. This is the time to start evaluating what is out there, expanding the kind of thought processes, opening up and going outside the box and looking at these kinds of things. As we begin to open up the country again, we are going to need people who are creative, who are innovative, who are up for the challenge, who want to go and look at where we can go from this point on. So let's say that you have other people that you know and you want to talk to on Zoom or on the phone about different ideas you might have in how can we work from home successfully? What are some great things for my company or my type of work that would work really well now? This is the time for this creative piece to happen. And I know you all can do it. That's one of the things that we are known for in this country, is coming up with these innovative, creative ways to make things be very successful. And you are the people who will do it.
Absolutely. And I'll repeat this over and over and over again. I have never met anybody that is unemployable. Never.
No.
And
No.
so, one of the points you make is that there are jobs that are out there right now. And the life cycle of a job posting is typically 6 to 8 weeks in terms of when they start interviewing and screening and doing all of the work that before they get to making a job offer. So companies are coming back and they are starting to reevaluate and reassess their needs.
Yes.
We are in uncertain times, and it is tough. And I think that one of the things that has helped me so much listening to you is just reminding me that the job seeking process, as overwhelming as it seems it can be, when you manage it and you break it into steps and you really look at this process of self-evaluation and introspection and asking yourself those questions and not letting it consume you in such a way that it's all consuming, it becomes a lot easier. And I think number two is that you really start to show progress and you become a better job seeker as well. And job seeking is a skill.
It
you know,
is.
doing all of these things that Linda is talking about, you know, it requires a commitment of time, and it requires a commitment to ask yourself some tough questions, some hard questions. But a lot of those questions are also going to be pretty easy. You know what your passions are. You know what it is that you really, really want to do. Writing out that job description and connecting those words, it's an excellent exercise to figure out what your next step is going to be.
Yep.
So as we close here today, just a couple of housekeeping things.
I have a couple. Can I just make one quick point here?
Absolutely.
A couple of things very quickly. One of them is when you're doing interviewing, it is critically important when you're doing the interview, before you do it, and there's going to be a lot of them online, just like we're doing right now. Before you do them, go stand somewhere for 30 seconds and make a power pose, as if you are Superman or Superwoman, and hold on to that pose and think about how that happens. You'll be surprised at how different your mindset is when you go into an interview. Second thing in an interview is make sure that whatever you're going to talk about, someone says, tell me about a time when you failed. Put together something ahead of time that is only 2 or 3 sentences, saying something like, well, I don't know that I would consider it a failure, but there was a time where we were not able to reach some sort of goal that we were trying to meet. And the team had to make some decisions on extending the date out in order to do that. And then you pause for about 1 second, and then you say to them, would you like some more information? Can I give you some more detail? Don't go into all the details first. Give an overview and then ask them if they want details. That way you control the interview very much. And the last thing on interviews, when they come to you and say, do you have any questions for us? You know, always asking the question of, can you tell me 2 things that are working really well with this position and 2 things that are a challenge? And that way you're going to get a lot more information about the job.
Yeah, and also that question that you're going to inevitably get asked at the beginning of an interview, can you tell me about yourself? And be prepared. That to me is, that's the first opportunity for you to take control of the interview and actually turn it into a conversation, not just an interview back and forth, but a conversation. And, you know, there's some great openers for that. Let me tell you what my former boss really loved about me. Let me tell you about my clients and what they think about me. You know, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to answer that, where you know, it doesn't have to be awkward, or it doesn't have to be, it's a scary question to answer. I mean, a lot of people have a really hard time answering that question, which also brings me to this other point. We are going to have seminars next week. One of them is with Linda Fine, who is just a wonderful, wonderful author, and she has written the book, The Fine Art of Small Talk, which is just, it's right to this point about how do you talk about yourself, how do you network, how do you open up conversations, how do you find the courage and you know, get rid of the insecurities of talking about yourself. We're also going to have, I think I said earlier, my wife will be on here to talk about working in the nonprofit world. She's a nonprofit expert and has spent her entire career working in nonprofits, both applying for jobs and hiring for jobs. We're going to have Liz Ryan, who is a career expert extraordinaire, and she's fun, she's raw, she'll be authentic, she'll tell it like it is, and she's just going to take questions for the whole hour. So if you have one of those questions that you've always wanted to ask about looking for a job, it could be, what do I say to somebody after I've gotten fired? Or I've worked, I've been a stay-at-home parent for the last 3 years. How do I explain that? There's all those types of questions that, and more basic, just to your points about the job search. So, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I keep calling her Linda Fine. It's Deborah Fine. Deborah Fine. Yes. It's Deborah. Yeah, Deborah. I'm sorry, Deborah. I'm sure you're listening. I don't know why. I think I have a friend named Linda Fine, and I just keep going back to that. Deborah Fine.
And I'm Linda.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And then
we're also going to have Janine Vandenberg, who's going to talk about looking for work for people over the age of 50. She talks about ageism. She's going to talk about intergenerational workforces, and also for people who are struggling because of their age. They think that it's harder to find a job. She's going to get some really good advice on that as well.
Good. Well, hopefully this gave you inspiration. This gave you a lot of things to think about, and you can go out and create your next career.
That's right. And Linda's her website is www.creatingpurpose.com. So if you want to find out more about Linda and her consultancy, and she gives speeches, she's an academic, she's very much involved in all the research surrounding all of this. A great way to find out more about her. So thank you so much, Linda. It's just been a treat, and I've learned a lot, and I know the people here watching have learned a lot as well. We're getting a lot of great comments and all the great insights, and so thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me on here. We're all in this together.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
And everyone stay well and stay healthy and spend this time thinking about what the next step is.
Absolutely.
And you are very capable of doing it. You're right. Everyone is employable, and employable on your own terms.
Yep. This is a comma, not a period.
Totally a comma. You're right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, everybody.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.